networking strategies that will be centered around, pre-COVID and incorporating strategies in this current COVID-19 situation. So I do hope everyone is staying safe and lifted. So a little bit more about me before I go into some of the strategies and then open for Q&A throughout the end. So my name is Alexandria Maloney. I'm based in the Washington, D.C. area. My professional background is in foreign affairs and diversity and inclusion work. I have my BA from John Cabot University, an MA from Morgan State, and an MPA from Cornell. And I have professional experience throughout the federal agency and nonprofit state space. So State Department, White House Initiative for HBCUs, the UN Foundation are a few. And most recently, I was elected as a board member for an organization called Black Professionals in International Affairs, which works to increase the number of African Americans in international affairs. And then the reason that we're all here, so just a little bit of context behind some of the strategies and my approach during this particular time where I've had a lot of time to reflect and think on, opportunities and some challenges in the networking space. So, as someone who was fortunate enough to be self-contained, away from any immediate harm, in the comfort of my home, I reflected on what sort of opportunities were present. And I began to reach out to check in on people in my network. So friends, family, professors, colleagues, professional contacts. And what I realized is that while I'm comfortably at home doing this work, from my couch, for example, so are most of the people who are in your network, right? They're at home. So this is an opportunity to be able to leverage this time that you may have to be able to connect with someone who may otherwise be busy or, at work, or may not have the time to be able to speak with you in great lengths. So I'd like to share a few strategies that I've learned and that I use regularly. So I encourage folks to get their pen and pencils or take notes, in your phone. And these things can be used to, continue, or for some to begin to engage with your networks. And then following that part, we can do some Q&A. And also, if you have any specific comments or questions on the topics, as I'm going through each strategy, then you can feel free to drop it in the chat box, which I believe is a feature. Yeah, I see it here. And I'll do my best to be sure to keep an eye on that and loop it back into the conversation. So strategy number one, I'm not sure if the PowerPoint is seen by everyone or if that's showing up.
I'm going to your PowerPoint right now.
Okay.
Animal is coming home from Iraq. Oh man, hey,
alrighty.
To the statue in front of my high school. What statue? Exactly.
And the slide that we're going to should say before the call, and then strategy one, which is, before we even get here. So sorry, I put a note in for myself. So the first slide, which says informational interviewing. So just for folks who don't know, informational interviewing is a tool that you can use when networking to get more information, learn more about the industry. So I'm not going to talk too much specifically about that because, tips and tricks are going to be included in this talk. But if you Google informational interview, plenty of information will come up where you can ask questions to people in the field. So if we go to the next slide, before the call or before this in-person meeting, the first thing that you need to do before you even meet this person in person is to do your research, right? So if you go to the next slide, the questions that you need to ask yourself before: who would you like to connect to? How will you connect to them? Why are you connecting to them? So that you're not wasting time on the call asking questions or asking questions about things that you could have researched and found online. The point of connecting and networking and having these meaningful connections is to get information that you can't find online, to have insider information, industry information. Are you on par with where you should be or where you could be for this field? What will you all talk about during the call? What's happening in the industry? So I am a strong supporter of researching individuals one through bios online, but also through their professional experience on LinkedIn. And then what do I usually say? So I think that it's appropriate so like, how do you reach out to ask someone that you do or may not know as well for this call? So what I usually do, I think it's appropriate to send a polite, respectful message asking, introducing yourself maybe in one line. Hi, my name is XY. I'm currently a student at this school studying this thing. Would you be opening to joining me for a quick fit for a 15-minute call as someone who would love to learn more about their professional journey in the industry, right? I do that for people who I know and who I don't know. Maybe I see there's someone who's in my field who I would like to get to know on LinkedIn. Maybe you message, 40 or 50 people. Maybe you only hear back from 10 or from 5, but that's 5 people in your industry that you didn't know. So I've really been encouraging, folks in my network and my mentees to use this as an opportunity to try to connect with new people. Because what I always say is what's the worst that can happen, right? So if we go to the next slide, my next strategy is, okay, so now you have someone interested, scheduled for your virtual coffee chat. Now what? My next strategy, being mindful of your environment and your background noise. So by no means is anyone expected to be wearing a full suit during this time, during the call. However, generally, or in person, but I'm speaking more on this virtual side because that's where we are right now. However, I generally suggest trying to keep things minimal, tidy, try to be in a quiet place to avoid any distractions because you want the focus to be on the conversation. So strategy 3, and I'm curious, feel free to drop it in the chat, any, strategies that you have or things that connect with you on this, but starting the conversation. So you buzz them and tell them or ring them and say, hello, this is Alexandria Maloney calling for XY person. What do you talk about? Maybe it's a high level person. I know when I was in college, it was definitely a growing and a learning period because I was learning, how to have conversations with these people that may have been very high level or, have more knowledge or experience in this field. And I say, even right now during this time, don't be afraid to ask, how are they doing during this time? What are things like where they are, what part of the country they're in, not to get too specific about how they're affected by COVID-19 or things like that. And then following that, I would suggest immediately thanking them for taking the time to speak to you. Because just because right now in this COVID-19 situation, for example, just because they're at home does not mean that they don't have work or anything else to do. It is important to always be grateful, no matter how the conversation goes. So that is my strategy 3 there on starting the conversation. And then going on to strategy 4, having your elevator pitch ready. Okay. And I think where folks may have some, how do I say this? I'm just going to say it because I want everyone to have the most benefit out of this. But sometimes we may make the mistake of thinking that, of describing so much about ourselves and our work that we miss the most important part of an elevator pitch, which is to include, what are you passionate about? What are things that you're interested in? Like using those buzzwords in there so that when you're talking to that person, they're having some context about, okay, this is why this person may want to talk to me or be interested in networking with me. So for those who have, I'm not sure if anyone can type in the chat or not, but if you feel like you have your elevator pitch ready, just in the chat, type ready, ! And if you feel like, there's still some room for improvement, put almost ready in the chat if you can. And then remember in your elevator pitch, after you describe yourself a little bit, be sure to put, what made you interested in the first place at the end of this elevator pitch? Why do you want to talk to them? That's the perfect transition, right? So I gave you all a little sample at the beginning of this call of what my elevator pitch is, right? Hi, my name is, I'm from what area? Here's a little bit about my educational background. Here's about my industry background. Or if you're still a student, if you don't know what industry you're in or what, I'm interested in this industry or the industry of the person that you're talking to. And what I'm passionate about increasing African American participation in government through this organization that I'm involved with. And then connect your interests to the speaker's industry area or express how and why and what specifically you would like them to talk about, what you want to learn about. I'm doing these things, and that's why I'm really grateful for this opportunity to speak to you, a person who has been, who is in this field, who can really give me some helpful advice. So I'm seeing some folks have put in the chats, seeing some almost ready, seeing some readies. So I am gonna use this as an opportunity for professional development. The person that said ready, I see Alexander. If you can hear me, I'd like for you to chime in and give us your elevator pitch right now, if you can.
Okay, cool. I can unmute myself. Hey, this is Alexander here. So usually when I'm networking, the target audience at this point in my life and this point in my career is really those who are working in property management, community development, or economic development. So I'll kind of tailor it to that specific community, right?
Okay.
So first, let's say I've usually done some background research. I act like I've meeting them for the first time, but realistically, I know who this person is, right?
Right.
So I'm like, hey, really excited to learn a little bit more about this specific thing. So I would say community development on the behalf of RCIE, the Russell Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation, because I've been learning a little bit more about people have been kind of interacting and how you guys are building up specifically from the aspect of launching economic initiatives into the Black neighborhoods and making sure that companies such as the Black Coffee Boys are able to have the resources they need to move forward. And that's kind of what I've really been focused on a couple of fronts with Alexander Creates, is just trying to create that community development. So really interested in just learning a little bit more about how you guys, one, kind of strategized and came up with the idea, and then two, what are some ways that you're kind of keeping on going, specifically with reference to that community and economic piece. So if you have 15 minutes, I'd love to kind of chat with you over phone or maybe get some coffee later this week. Here's a card. Feel free to hit me when you have some time.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much, Alexander. You did a great job of identifying who you are, the things that you're passionate about, a little bit about you in terms of your experience and your background and what you're interested in learning. So those are the key things that really come into play when you're talking about a solid elevator pitch, right? And depending on who you're talking to will depend on what you're sharing or how much of information that you're sharing there. So thank you so much for that. We can go ahead to the next strategy. So this is the part where from this point forward, I'd advise people to have pen in hand, because I want to pour out all of the strategies and things that I personally use within this time frame. So a lot of it may be coming at rapid fire pace, and I apologize in advance. But if there's something where you're like, could you mention one thing one more time, just drop it in the chat and I'll be sure to come back to that point. So for strategy 5, in terms of what is the conversation that's being had, the advice that I give to folks, let them do the talking. As much as we love to hear ourselves speak, for a networking opportunity, informational interviewing, we're not there to hear ourselves speak. Our point is to say as little as possible and receive as much guidance, advice, wisdom, and information that this other person may have that can apply to your journey, your career, and those things. So, be prepared to ask questions about their industry, their career, any advice that they would have for someone in the field. During these talks, whether it's virtual or in person, have your pen and paper ready to go. I keep a little notebook with me everywhere I go, just in case someone, says something. I said, oh, I'm going to take a note on that. Or maybe they're, giving you advice about what kind of books to read, what kind of resources. You don't want to be fumbling, struggling to get that together. So have that prepared before. Again, I mentioned you can Google and research more about examples of informational interview questions. I advise try not to ask questions where you can find the answers online, right? So questions that I like to ask are, what's a typical day in the life of the job? What does it look like for you? What are challenges that you didn't expect? What do you know now that you wish you knew when you first started? You want to get information on where did they learn? What are things they wish that they knew? Those are definitely the key areas and key questions that I would suggest. So moving on to the next strategy 6, be genuinely interested and curious. It goes a long way, whether this person is directly in your field or not. I'm in a space now, I'm looking to meet and connect with people who are in completely different industries and fields from me. I want to learn new things. Not to say that I know everything about my own industry, because I don't. It's still evolving and growing. But I want to learn more about, what's trending, what's the current issue or trend in your industry? What should I keep my eye on? Okay. So that's all that I have to say on that. Strategy 7, and then there's one more after that. Strategy 7, be respectful of their time, right? It's online. So in theory, everyone should be able to do a calendar invite. Be mindful of the start time and the finish time. So when you feel that the conversation is kind of coming to a close, or, you're in person, they're kind of looking at their clock, or you're on the call and you realize, it seems like they have something else they need to do. This is my line that I'm classic for using. I'll say, XY person who I'm talking to, I want to be respectful of your time. So I want to say thank you again for taking the time to speak to me. And I would love to stay open. I would love to stay connected to you if you're open to that, so that it concludes the conversation in a respectful way. Generally, when I do, informational interviews or networking calls, depending on the level of the person, that I'm speaking to, generally I'll send people asking, can I get 15 minutes? Can I get 15 minutes for a coffee chat, 15 minutes for a virtual talk? And usually, no matter how high level or whatever level the person is, if you say 15 minutes, 9 times out of 10 for me, they've gone on to 30 minutes, to 45 minutes, to an hour or longer sometimes. I kid you not. And it's funny because I don't want to be the person to say, I'm sorry, I have to go a lot of the time. But, people get passionate to talk about the things that they care about and the things that are important and, connected to their field. So just being respectful of their time is important. And I give that calendar invite tip because that also shows your professionalism, which I will also speak a little bit more on in terms of email etiquette, in-person etiquette, and then strategy 8, which is follow-up, which we can go on ahead to. So follow-up, sending a follow-up email or message, simply thanking them for their time. It doesn't have to be long and lengthy. If anything stuck out specifically to you, you mentioned this resource. I took a look at it. Thank you so much for sharing this. I'm looking forward to staying connected. If you're not already connected with the person on LinkedIn, ask if it's okay to add them on LinkedIn so you can revisit that and keep them in your network, because maybe there may not be a direct connection for the two of you at this time, but you never know down the road where you may, have the opportunity for you to reconnect with them or for you to connect them with an opportunity, right? So those are definitely things that I would advise. I would also advise, a colleague of mine sent me an email that was sent by a student, well-intended, but the grammar, it was informal. I advise everyone who is on this call and who can hear the sound of my voice to be mindful, do the grammar checks, look online to see sample of email thank you follow-up, sample of introduction email, so that that you're on par. Because sometimes folks come with different environments and different learning levels, we're all coming into the game new at some point, right? So we're all here to learn. And the key is to do the best that we can as individuals to learn how to best represent ourselves, because we don't want to lose an opportunity before the opportunity even presented itself. So we want to make sure we put our best foot forward, come off professional. I advise people lean on the formal side before leaning on the informal side. So for example, for certain contacts, if they're higher or a professional person or an older person than me, 9 times out of 10, I'll just say Mr. or Mrs. Blank by the last name. And then if they, in their response email, if they sign it with their first name, then it's appropriate to say their first name. You know, I do not advise, you know, if you're sending an email to President Barack Obama, okay, you're not going to say, hi, Barack, right? So that's one other thing that I would like to really highlight and encourage individuals to do, you know, more research on in terms of professional development. So I'm going to take a pause right there to open up the Q&A for folks who may have any questions. To please, either you're welcome to put them in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself and ask the question, that's fine. So I'm going to put a break here for Q&A, and then I had a few pro tips as closing thoughts that I can share.
Okay, so yeah, I have a question to where you were talking about how you kind of sense the conversation is coming to an end. Mm-hmm. And to end the awkwardness, you spoke something along the lines where I want to respect you and your time and thank you for blah, blah, blah. Can you repeat that whole thing, please?
Yes, absolutely. So what I generally say is I want to be respectful of your time. So I wanted to say thank you again for taking the time to speak to me. And I would love to stay, or I would like to stay connected if you're open to that, right? Because you want to make sure that there's some sort of action connected to what you're doing, right? And
right.
Sometimes we are, and thank you for that question, sometimes we're connected to people because it's about a career, about a job, about a thing like that. And I was on another call with a gentleman last week who asked me, he said, well, Alex, how soon do I, you know, tell them that I'm looking for a job, or how do I express that, you know, I'm looking for a job in their field or at their company, right? And you don't want to come off as needy or, you know, thirsty, as the young folks say, you know, starting off with that, because it's going to seem like you're just using them to get a job, right? So, but what can be a good door opener is asking them, I've been exploring, when you do your elevator pitch, at the end of your pitch, I've been exploring careers and jobs in this area. I've been exploring positions at this company. I'm curious to know, how has your experience at this company been? And at the end of that call, what I would advise, you know, I think it's very appropriate to ask someone, you know, could I get feedback on my resume? Could I send you my resume and you can tell me if it's up to industry standard, or if this is, you know, how the format that you see, is this similar to other formats? Granted, thank you. You know, this is not talking to them. I'm just speaking to you all. The resume feedback is great, right? We all could use feedback, but 9 times out of 10, they're going to view your resume and see, you know, is this person a fit? If they have any opportunities in mind, they may be able to connect you to those opportunities. And it gives you a time to share a little bit more about you without overwhelming the phone call or the in-person meeting. So that's another advice. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much. That was helpful.
Okay, yep. And talk about asking questions at events. Maybe you could give me, Vanner, could you maybe hop on and just ask a little more explicitly what you mean by that? Because if not, oh, okay, go ahead.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm one of David Hurd's students. I was actually in your seat right when this class was first created. So, you know, David, thank you for allowing Alexandria the opportunity to speak and give her insights.
Absolutely. And before you go on, since you're on here already, tell them what you did after the class.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so when I actually took I'll start off from the beginning, Dave. When I first took David's class, I actually had my very first internship with the Catholic Relief Services teaching English. And after taking this class and having 5 other internships in between, I was able to actually be the first Indiana University student to intern at the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs in New York City. So, but how I met Alex was at what I'm going to frame the question around was actually at one of these events. So typically, another great way to network is to go to professional development groups. For us, we went to the Black Professionals in International Affairs, and Alexandria and I are also part of the Girl Squad because we're in national security as well. So another way to basically network and to create visibility is when there is like a panel discussion or a large forum, to have that, what basically Alex was talking about at the beginning of this presentation, is to have your research ready on topics that you were wanting to explore when you go to these events. So for instance, Alex and I went to the event on the African Develop Forum about the work with the IMF and the Millennium Gates. I forgot the other organizations that were present there with BPIA, but making sure being able to stand up and give your quick elevator pitch saying like, hello, my name is Vannery Kong. I currently work for a cybersecurity firm. This is the work I'm doing. And then address the panel like, this is what my question is about too, because from there, someone in that room might have the same question as you. And from there, you might be able to get business cards and then be able to go talk to the speaker more and create that sort of working mentorship, because now they have like an idea of what you're interested in based on your question when going to these events.
Thank you, Vannery. I feel like you answered the question, so I'm.
I know, I wanted you to talk about it. That's what I'm saying.
Thank you for that. Thank you. And that is definitely the professional events and conferences that if you're able to go to them. And when you go, one strategy that I use sometimes, and that I received in terms of advice, is when you're trying to get connected to a certain industry, go to these conferences. But they release the guide or the conference program or the speakers ahead of time usually. So any conference I go to, like, it's nice to go to a conference just to sit and listen and learn, right? But sometimes you're there to take it to the next level. I want to be able to connect with people who are doing the speaking. I might want to be able to speak here next year or 1 year or something like that. So keeping those things in mind, trying to do research, trying to find out who's speaking at conferences, doing research on the person that's going to be speaking. If the person's going to be doing a keynote or a panel, doing some research. And when you get up to ask a question, ask with confidence. Be bold in your question, because there have been experiences with myself, for example, where I've gotten up to speak, ask a question, still as a student. I'll say, my name is so-and-so, I'm a student at this school studying this. My research is based on this. If you're a student and you have an interest area, say, you're researching that. My research area is this, and this is my question. Where do you see the future of this going? Where do you see where are the gaps that you find in this? Where are the opportunities for this? Where are the challenges that you all are seeing in this field? And then when, the Q&A for that event is over, walk right on up to those people. Walk right up and say, hi, thank you again. Thank you for being here and speaking. And thank you for answering my question, if they answered your question. And then be willing to, I advise students and professionals to have a business card. You can get them cheaply done online. Vistaprint.com is my go-to. You can get like 500 for like $10. And it really just sets you apart if you're a student that's looking to be more professional. And you don't have to have a title, all that stuff on there. Your name, your email, your phone number. Maybe a little picture on there of yourself if you want to like get fancy with it. But Vistaprint.com, and asking them, saying, I'd like to talk with you more offline. Don't overwhelm and bombard them at the event, at the networking event, at the career fair, at these things. Ask a question or two, ask maybe one question, follow-up question. And then what you do is say, I would love to take this conversation offline. Could we exchange contact? Or I'm all out of business cards. Could I get yours? And then follow up with them within 2 days, because people move quickly in this world. So that's the advice that I have. Vannery, thank you for asking that question, because that's definitely a big one. Were there any other questions?
I had a question specifically for you. So I'm currently double majoring in anthropology and psychology, where like
What was the first thing you said? I'm sorry, your volume is a little low, so I'm having a hard time.
No, you're fine. So I'm actually interested in what you're doing with diversity and inclusion. I myself am double majoring right now in psychology and anthropology,
Okay.
and I'm researching how to encourage inclusion, especially people from different cultural backgrounds. So I'm interested in what your degrees are focused on and what were the steps you took to be where you are right now.
Thank you, Marlene, for that question. So my background is actually in international affairs and foreign policy. That's what I studied in school. My BA is in international affairs. My MA from Morgan is in international studies. And while I was at Morgan, that's when I kind of had a realization in terms of the direction that I would like to go in my professional career. And I knew that I wanted to work in the public sector, in the government, in some leadership capacity. So from that point, that's when I looked up and said, okay, well, let me see what other people who are in positions. What's the chief diversity officer of, of the Department of Defense or something, I don't know, of any organization? What does their trajectory look like on LinkedIn? What did they do? Because that will be a good blueprint. Maybe you don't have to do the exact same thing as them, but to see what you're competing against when you get to another level. Because the key is not to get an entry-level job. That's great and fine for the short term in your student life, but it's good to think short term and long term. So looking at the big picture, looking at the long term of where you want to be professionally. So after I did more research on what people in the field are doing in diversity and inclusion and in the foreign policy field, which I'm interested in both, and especially the intersection of both, but what that could look like for me. And that's when I, realized that I needed to get a degree that was more concentrated in government or government administration, which is what led me to do my master's in public administration at Cornell. So while I was there, and mind you, up to that point, I had some interest in diversity and inclusion, but I didn't really have a strong handle on it. Because I was more focused on the international affairs, foreign service, and things like that, diplomacy. But when I got to Cornell, the program is great in that it lets you take classes in other areas, business classes, finance, whatever you want to take. Of course, you have to take your core government administration classes. But it was at Cornell where I began taking an organizational design class, systems thinking class, that really opened my mind to say, wow, government workers or leaders in government and leaders in industry are really problem solvers. And at the end of the day, that's what systems thinking is. You're understanding different systems, ecosystems, understanding gaps and problems in those systems and bringing up solutions, right? But in order to get competency in that space, you have to have a wealth of knowledge and experience in that space to say, well, this is what happened in this industry or at this company. This is how they solved it. Or this company tried to do this and it didn't work, and being able to apply that. So as a student, I was very intentional in order to increase my professional experience and my professional, research background in this, and intentionally selecting project or papers or research topics that are connected to these areas that I wanted to learn. So by doing research papers, that would be like, I want to do an organizational assessment. Is this organization doing a good job based on the data, on the things that I'm reading, on the research? And then I would reach out on LinkedIn or through my own networks to people who I'm looking to learn from industry leaders, right? I want to know, what are you guys thinking? What's the strategy? How is it working? How is it not working? So reaching out to different industry leaders and simply saying, honestly, the student ticket is the best ticket you can have sometimes, to say, I'm a student at this school, in this program, and I'm currently conducting some research, or I am working on a research project or a consulting project, and on these topics, and you're a leader of industry in this. I'm interested in knowing if the things that I'm learning in theory and in class are actually applicable in real life. And then if you really want to, get spicy with it, you have can you include their perspectives or their interviews incorporate it into the paper. So that gives it a little extra bump. And this stuff, again, I was connected to have this talk with you all today from Vannery. So this is really kind of like insider information that is, that I will share with like individuals that I am directly connected to or my mentees. So this is like not even to toot my own horn on this, but this is like cream of the crop information here. So I just wanted to verbalize that. And thank you for your question, Marlene. And feel free to find me and add me on LinkedIn, and we can talk more about it. And I can give a little more specifics. I don't want to, dominate the call with this conversation, but feel free to reach out to me offline.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks a lot. I was actually thinking of going into organizational and industrial social psychology.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is very beneficial. I just didn't know how to go about actually doing that. But for sure, I will take the information that you did give me. And again, I respect everything that you've taught us so far. It's been very helpful. It will be helpful, I'm sure. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for that feedback. So maybe I'll take one more quick question, and then I'll give you guys my pro tips and concluding thoughts. So were there any other questions right now?
Since no one else has jumped in, and I see Vannery, I was going to ask the same question. Talk about the use of LinkedIn in networking.
Sure. So LinkedIn, I'll just start from the beginning. LinkedIn is a platform that's used for professionals to connect. So it's like a Facebook, but for professional connections. And that's an opportunity for you to showcase who you are, what your accomplishments are. You can upload your resume on there. You can, put features, highlights, photos of you, if you're organizing something or speaking at an event or something you hosted or did, any, news articles or press releases, or if you want to include a writing sample of research, something that you included, you can put that there. But it is definitely leading the way on how to connect with professionals in the field, and not only connecting with them, but seeing what other people are doing, like just to learn other people's paths and journeys. You can see, what did they do after school? What kind of school did they go to? Where did they go to work? What kind of professional organizations are they in? Sometimes you can see people's interests, things like that. So I would definitely advise for those who don't have a LinkedIn to get on LinkedIn. The earlier, the better. Make sure you have a nice professional headshot. And you have someone that you know and trust. Ask them, can you look over my LinkedIn and give me some feedback? Or if you see any, grammatical, can you look out for grammatical errors and things like that? Me and my friends do that all the time with each other. How are ways that we can continue to boost our own profile and look and share the things that we're doing? So LinkedIn has been fundamental for me in my career personally, because I'd easily say half, if not more than half of the networks that I have used and have gained have been through LinkedIn. So if you don't have one, I definitely advise going to the website and checking it out. I'm sure you can find a really simple like YouTube video, how to use LinkedIn, that can kind of walk you through the process too.
We've started them in class, and we've gotten to the experience section. So we're working on experience as well as endorsements. And I just wanted to stress them the importance of gathering those endorsements. It's like someone saying that, like for instance, when I first started talking to Alexandria today and said, how about I endorse you a couple places on your LinkedIn, being able to say public speaking, social media. And these are, I don't even know if these are listed as her endorsements, but these are areas that we all have identified today are her strengths. And then going back to her LinkedIn page to be able to say, I saw her do this, so I can vouch for her and saying these are areas that she's strong in.
Right. And people can leave like recommendations too on there where they can write a little recommendation about you or just, share that they've worked with you. And really quickly on the topic of of letters of recommendations, I know this isn't like direct to networking, but what I will say is that it is very important. And what I like to do, because the folks that you have who are writing your recommendations may be very busy, whether it's your professor or your supervisor or someone like that, provide them some bullet points on things that you would like for them to highlight for you. Say, I'm really looking for a recommendation that can highlight my leadership. And here's examples of my leadership to highlight my communication skills, my adaptability skills. Here's some examples for you. I've had people who have asked me who are truly that busy, but they ask me, can you draft your letter of recommendation? And I'll add and change things around for me, which I think is appropriate too. And I always ask when people do write my letter of recommendation or when I ask them to, if they can leave it general in the sense that they don't say, maybe the letter of recommendation is for scholarship or for something like that. I ask my recommenders to leave it general. Just share about, what just speak directly to my skills if you can, so that you can use that letter and ask them for a copy of it. If they have to submit it somewhere, and ask them, can I also have a copy for myself? And then you save that in your email or your Google Drive so that when you're submitting your applications, when you're submitting your portfolios, like I feel like these can all be talks on themselves, so I'm not going to give too much, but when you're submitting those other professional works or interviews, you're able to provide that and say, also, I know you all didn't ask for it, but here's a recommendation from this person that can speak more on my work. And also the portfolio idea that Vannery and I talk about very regularly. So that folks will take a physical portfolio, kind of like a binder, to interviews or, to different settings that may have your resume, your cover letter, but it's used to highlight different accomplishments that you've had so that you don't overwhelm your original resume that you send in. So if you do make it to the interview stage of that, you whip out that portfolio and say, if they ask you a question about what's your experience doing event coordination, for example, or I'll just use that as an example. You can say, well, yes, I do. I have multiple experiences on that. Actually, I can show you here in this portfolio. Don't be afraid to put a picture in it, put a picture and some information, some description, because it helps people to absorb and say, this person is serious. She knows what she's talking about and she's professional. That really boosts your competitiveness against the other individuals that you may be interviewing with. And that applies to any field. Any field can have a portfolio. It's not just about, graphic design or architecture portfolio, right? It can be policy, liberal arts, science, STEM, research. You can put a writing sample in there, a list of different topics that you've written about, things like that, your extracurriculars. So sorry to go off topic there a little bit.
Actually, you were right on point. And even just to add on to the portfolio, and this is a topic that I knew we weren't going to be able to catch in an 8-week class, but it's a great place to even say having a digital portfolio is also a place where you can go in. If you can put it on the tablet and still be able to scroll as you communicate with whomever you're speaking with, is a great place, a great ad to bring to a job fair that sets you apart, as well as in that interview of, scroll around and give it to them and just let them scroll through your works. So again, it also, for my sophomores and juniors who are still strong in college, is a great place for you to start building up that portfolio. For those of you who are seniors, it might be something that you build as you start your career path. But having those images and that background and anything you've done are great places to share, to really show the examples of what you've done. This is also information that you can include in your LinkedIn also, whereas you have the tabs that you could add. There's things like other activities or accomplishments. Those are areas that you could drop down and include a video of something of where you spoke, or examples or images of things that you've done. All of these are just really trying to sell all of the different facets of things that you've done in your career up to now.
Absolutely. And you want the work to speak for itself, to sell itself. You shouldn't be there trying to do a hard sell for yourself. This is why you guys really need me. I walk into spaces saying, can you tell me a little bit more about what you all are doing and where you all are having some challenges and some gaps? and then saying, these are the things that I think I can contribute, I can bring to help you all reach your goals. So that's kind of a consulting perspective on that, but it applies to any industry in any space. And then when you follow, I'm telling that portfolio that takes it to the next level, because not a lot of people are really hip to that portfolio idea. And the work, again, it speaks for itself, so that you're not having to do a hard sell. You're able to say, here's my track record of things that I've done, you all are having challenges with. And another good tip, this is another pro tip before I give y'all my list of pro tips, is when you ask them what challenges they're having in their company or in the industry area, and it's good to actually do some research by talking to other people in the company if you can before getting to the interview, so you already know this and have the answer ready. But you ask them what, gaps or challenges is the company facing, or this office facing. And then when they share that with you, if you can, and if you have the experience, say, well, I've had some experiences addressing these things in this way, X, Y, and Z, listing 1, 2, and 3. So I'm not telling anybody how to do it or what to do. I'm just sharing that this is what I do, and that, it's been successful for me specifically. So did anyone else have any questions before I go on to the pro tips? And if you do, feel free to just drop them in the chat if you had any more questions. And also,
let's just go ahead and jump into your pro tips, and then I have one question for you and the other professionals before we go.
Okay, sounds good. So a few pro tips. Again, this is going to be.
Are these on your slides?
Rapid fire. So they're not on the slides, and I'm sorry that they're not. But I was just kind of jotting things down that I thought were worth, including here. So the first thing, the biggest thing that has been fundamental for me in managing my network is creating an Excel spreadsheet with the information that they give me on their business card. As soon as I meet them, I'll drop it into an Excel spreadsheet, professional contact sheet, right? Because nobody has time to be sitting there flipping through 1,000 business cards, trying to find someone or trying to remember someone from, I know someone at this company or at this organization that I may want to talk to, or maybe a friend or a colleague says, I'm looking, in this area that you could connect them to. When you, on that Excel spreadsheet, you can do control find, and be able to find that person. Start it tomorrow. Like if you get a business contact tomorrow, start from there. Because I know that can be overwhelming, because over time we can accumulate a lot of contacts, right? So I know for me, I started probably in like sophomore year of college, maybe freshman, sophomore year. And at that time, I didn't have that many contacts, right? But then easily within 2 or 3 years of time, you meet a lot of people in college. You're going to events, you're going to conferences, you're going to different things. And don't be afraid to put a little note in there. This is where I met this person, or, we talked about this topic, something like that, just to remind you, refresh you. Or for those who are tech savvy, you can hyperlink the person's LinkedIn onto their name too, so that you can kind of have a refresher. And then I get a lot of questions on, well, how do you stay in contact with all these networks? Who has time to sit here and email and call and message all of these people to stay in contact? So what I advise for people is to have kind of like a priority list, like a top 10, top 20 people that are like directly in their field, have some major contribution, people that you want to keep in that circle, right? But for the network at large, what I like to do is just send a blast email, during the beginning of the year. Some people do it seasonally, every season, but I like to do mine at the beginning of the year. And I do it in a way that's like, hi, hello there, hi friends, family, and colleagues, Alexandria here. Here are some updates from my past year that I've done, highlights. What am I doing in school? Where did I intern? What did I, putting pictures of things. A great website for that is called MailChimp.com. I'm going to try to pull up the chat here really quick and drop it there. Free website that helps you. And I just copy and paste every contact that I have in that Excel sheet and put that into and email them. And then at the end, I'll ask, and tell me what's new in your world, what's new or what's happening. Some people may not respond to that. Some people will respond. But that's just to, people remember who you are and what you're doing, and you can tell them what you're doing. And, I just graduated. I'm actively looking for jobs. I'm actively looking for opportunities. That's how I like to say, actively looking for opportunities in this area. If anyone, within my contacts knows of any opportunities, or any individual who knows an opportunity, please connect me. So managing contacts and networks, the Excel sheet, that once a year email blast. One book recommendation that I have that really elevated my networking game is called Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi, that I'm going to drop here. This has been fundamental. You can do more research and summarize, learning and summaries. What else? I already mentioned, wanting to do, when speaking to a new contact or a high level contact, asking them, can you do more research on the topic? Like, say, I'd be interested in research. Thank you for speaking to me. I had a great conversation. If you're open to it, I would love to do more research around the things that we talked about and report it back to you and get your ideas on it. Because then that's building a relationship there. And you're also displaying your work ability too. The next pro tip I have, never say no or that you're not interested in something. So, and the example that I'll give is that you never know what the other person may have in mind or what opportunities they have for you. But if you go in saying, well, I only want to be a finance investor on Wall Street, I'm not looking to do anything else in any other places, that person may have had some contact or may have had an opportunity that may not be the exact thing, but still a good opportunity. So the example that I'll give, I was connected to a woman who is a retired ambassador. And, my background and area is in defense and diversity and inclusion. I'm set for right now in my field, but I always say I'm open to having the conversation and learning about opportunities in all places, right? And she asked a very general question, have you ever, or are you interested in working in political campaigns? To which I said, well, I have some experience or some exposure. That's what you can say. I've had exposure to this area, or, I have some background knowledge or information on it. But I haven't really, what makes you ask that question? It's okay to ask, what makes you ask that question to understand where they are? And I won't share with what campaign, but she says, I'm actually on this committee that's selecting prospective cabinet members for XY presidential campaign, right? So if I went up, when she asked me that question initially, if I would have told her, no, I don't like political campaigns. No, I'm not interested. Or, I already have a job, so I'm not really looking for anything right now. That could have closed me off for a whole opportunity that may not manifest right now, not this week, not this month, maybe not this year, but in the future. And when the person does come back around, or when an opportunity does present itself, if you're not in a position to take it, say, thank you so much for this opportunity. I am so grateful for this. I'm in a position right now where I really want to continue putting in the work where I am, or I really enjoy the work that I'm doing right now. Or I'm not in a position to accept that right now. And I really hope that isn't a problem. Thank you so much. Then I think that that's appropriate, and that's okay too. My next tip is, I know for going to networking events and going to even conferences, but specifically networking events alone. One tip that I like to use, because that can be very intimidating to go up to people that you may not know, or go to an event where you don't know anybody. And one tip that a few tips that I'll share around this is, one, you all are all there for the same reason, probably, or around a similar topic or similar industry area. So it's okay. If I'm at a networking happy hour or a networking event, I may go up, get a beverage, take a second, collect yourself, take your coat off, sit down. You know, I might kind of check my phone for a second, grab a beverage, and then leisurely, you know, maybe to the person to the left or the right of me, you know, one individual person or group, I'll go up and say, hi, are you all here for this XY event? Or, you know, or hi, are you all also in the government industry? Are you all in this, in the education industry? And then you say, do you mind if I join you all? Boom, conversation.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
In that same scenario at that
Yeah.
event,
Yeah.
with professionals, and you know you're searching for employment, do you get an alcoholic beverage or just a like water or pop?
Right. So that's a very good question. I would always lean on the side of being safe rather than sorry. Being formal is okay. You know, getting a drink, or what I know, people that folks that I know, because maybe you may be in a environment where drinking is the norm, right? You might be at a finance or a law, you know, lawyers, they will drink you under the a legal event where everyone may have one, you know, beer or have a drink there. So what I would advise, just to be safe about yourself, because you don't want to, again, these are still professional contacts, right? So don't be afraid to get a water, or, you know, a ginger ale. I know in the past I've gotten a ginger ale and asked them to put, you know, olive on with the stick on to make it look like I was drinking something, but really it's just ginger ale. And if you do, you know, if you are at the appropriate age or level to get something, an alcoholic beverage, or if that's, you see a drink in everybody else's hand, you know, I wouldn't go anything farther than like one beer or one glass of wine max. So thank you for bringing that question in. And then the one other point that I have for networking events, I know we're coming up on 5:28, but one thing that I like to suggest to people as well is to try to find the organizer. When you get there, go up to the registration table and say, hi, thank you for hosting this event. Is the organizer of this event here? And then when, of course, they're going to be there, you go up to them. Maybe their name was on the Eventbrite, you know, go up and say, hey, is Linda here? Is Lisa here? Go up to that person and say, hi, I saw this event on Eventbrite on XY, whatever I saw it. You know, I'm interested in this. I'm trying to get into this industry. Do you know anyone here you could introduce me to? Could you introduce me to someone? They're the organizer. They know everybody at the event. Okay, so that's really a pro tip right there to use that. And the other things that I have here, I've already mentioned. Don't be afraid to ask the person that you're networking with, or high level or whatever level they are. Learn more about projects and organizations that they're a part of outside of their job, so that you have other things to know about them, or, you know, what they are passionate about. And ask them, do they know anyone at their organization or in their industry in maybe a more specific division or area, who you could talk to, is another way to close out that conversation. And then, yeah, so that's everything that I have there. The last point I'll say, because someone asked it in another conversation, and I know we're right here on 5:30, so I'm sorry if I go over 1 or 2 minutes. But someone asked me, what do they say if a person rejects their invitation or says, you know, I'm just too busy, I'm sorry. And what has been done to me, which it happens to everybody, right? And I'm in the mindset of, I've got nothing to lose. So if they say no, I don't take it personally. If they are really that busy, then that's fine. That's on them then. But sometimes if it's really somebody who, like, you know, you really would like to connect with, again, you don't have anything to lose, right? Don't take it personally, and don't give up. Like in the book that I suggested, speaks further on. Message them back. I've had people who respond to me and say, I am too busy. And they might be, right? I don't know. But I'm too busy for a phone call or for an in-person coffee meeting. Can you email me the questions that you have, right? Use that as an opportunity. Or if they don't lead with that, you can suggest, you can say, I understand completely that you're a very busy person. Would you mind possibly answering these following questions for me? 1, 2, 3 questions. And if they answer, then great. That's more information. that you can add to your Google Doc that you have where you're compiling your industry information, your notes to be able to reference when you're talking to other people in the industry. So I'm going to go ahead and conclude there. I'm sorry, we're 1 minute over. But
okay. I want to make one announcement, and then I value your time as well as I value theirs. Let me make this announcement, and if you have time, I have one more question for you.
Yeah, I do.
We are over in class. If you need to leave, feel free. But as you can tell, I know from my perspective, this is a wealth of information. So if you could hang on with us for another couple minutes, feel free to hang out. If you have additional, maybe one simple question in the end, you can either drop it in the chat and maybe we can follow up with you later. The question I have for you, and this is for me, and as I told my students, I hate networking. I absolutely hate it. So for me, where I struggle is small talk. I'm straightforward. I'm gonna tell you what's on my mind and keep it moving. But when a networking scenario, how can us, all of us, be able to build and just foster small talk conversations in networking events, anything like you've described?
Yes. Small talk can be some of the most awkward things. Look, can be one of those most awkward things, but how I approach small talk, and I'm going to look at it from the perspective of I'm entering a space where I don't know these people. That's like the most challenging setting, right? There's a few things that everyone in that room has in common. Okay. One, you're sitting in the same city at the very least. I've been in rooms with people where I'm literally like, I don't even understand what y'all do. I don't know what I'm going to talk to you guys about. But guess what? People are human. They have a family. They're from a place. They went to school somewhere. Okay. Those are all examples of things that could be, ice breaking for a conversation, small talk, asking, hey, how did you hear about this event? Are you a member of this organization? Maybe we're here for a networking event organization. Are you an alumni of this school, or are you, asking about school, or where did they go to school? And asking people where are they from the area? If you're in Indianapolis, oh, are you from Indianapolis? Or I hate it, it's corny, but oh, the weather is so beautiful today. Like I just, and then start the conversation off naturally from there, I think. And then asking people, just be curious, like just wanting to know more about people. What brings you to this event? What industry are you in? What are you drinking? What do you have in your cup? Small things like that, just to break the ice, I think. And also I know I'm a very extroverted person, so this is easy for me to say. But when I'm in places, there are times where I see that person who's there alone, and I intentionally go up and grab that person. I'm like, what brings you here to this place? How did you find out about this? Hey, come here. Let me introduce you to some people here. Let me bring you over to the people. Look, like I know people. I just met these people too. Let me introduce you to these people over here. And yeah, so those are the tips that I have for small talk. And I've got time. I can stay on for maybe like 10 more minutes if people really had any, dying questions. But I also put my LinkedIn on here. And because Vannery is like family to me, I'm extending that you all are like extended family to me too now. So
well, you always have a welcome place here in Indianapolis.
Thank you.
As far as students go, a great way to show your appreciation for what we shared today is once you go to her LinkedIn page, not only connecting with her, but again, endorsing her in any of those areas that she has at the very bottom. If you scroll down, there's a section called endorsements. And I'm certain she probably has public speaking or networking listed, just endorse it. And then sometimes if it may ask you, how do you know this person? It might say you were in a webinar together or work together. This is almost like a session where you've learned something from her through a work event. So feel free to include that. Okay, I'm done talking. Again, I knew this was going to be highly valuable. I want to make sure that we get any questions answered. Since she wants to give us 10 minutes, we'll take them. So we'll go to 5:45. 9 minutes left. What questions do you have? Since no one jumped in, I will share one that we had from our last session that a lot of people said they really liked this. And both you and Vanner could answer this one. In one sentence, what would you tell your 21-year-old self?
Ooh,
Oh my God.
that's a good one.
That is a good one.
Banner, you want to go first, or you want me to go?
You can go first.
Okay. In one sentence, do it anyway. There were a lot of opportunities that I realized that I probably could have gone even further or higher in, that I didn't feel, I was kind of nervous or didn't feel confident in myself, that I could have probably gone even further than what I was doing. So do it anyway. You know, what's the worst that could happen? I'll conclude with those two for that question. Vannery?
I would definitely have to agree with that. That's definitely part of my answer. But mine is more so, if there's something that you want to do, like especially with specialization. So for me, I didn't really know that I wanted to go into the fields of like global governance and cybersecurity because they're not big markets within the Indianapolis area, and they're so very hidden. So if there's something that you want to do, focus on that, even if it's not in your immediate area. Like, for instance, I mean, Alex, I know you can attribute to this because you actually interned for the State Department. The State Department has virtual internships.
Yeah.
There's a lot of opportunities and virtual opportunities for students that may not be in the DMV area, may not be in New York, not be anywhere. So just because it seems impossible and no one else from your immediate community may have done it, doesn't mean it's not possible. And had I known that, my 21-year-old self, I definitely would have completely shifted my focus even more so. I mean, I'm still happy that I got to work at the UN and the International Center in Indianapolis, and definitely still had a couple of internships that revolved around foreign policy. But had I known that the OECD is always actively looking for diverse students of color from different parts of the U.S., I would have definitely shifted my direction. But that lack of access with the digital divide is so crucial right now in the 21st century. That's what I would have told myself. If you find an interest, keep researching it. Like what you stated before, keep researching, keep asking the right questions, look on LinkedIn, prospect, cold call outreach, cold email outreach. It all attributes to everything.
Yes. Yep. And one thing I will say, following up on what Vannery just said, don't let your physical location or your environment determine your outcome, determine your direction on life, because we live in a digital age, and we have so many opportunities and resources at our fingertips, and sometimes it's hard because you're saying, well, I'm interested in finance, or I'm interested in this thing, but I'm here in Indiana, I'm not in New York City, right? But like Vannery just said, you have remote opportunities. You could still be growing and learning in that industry until you get there. But there's always a benefit in exploring where the hub of your industry is, because that's where the most opportunities are going to be. So I joke and say all the time, if the Department of Defense or if all federal government was in Oklahoma right now, I would be in Oklahoma, because that's where the source of the opportunities and the work and the network exists. So that's something that I'd like to plug in there too.
Right. And I also wanted to offer up that I would be more than happy to be a resource to anyone as well, along with Alexandria, because, for those who are about to graduate, making that big jump and getting those like entry-level jobs, it is a hard transition. So, we also want to be here as a source to kind of give you like guidelines and everything. Don't be afraid to fail. And there's a quote that I listen to by Steve Harvey. He may not be the best person to quote at this time, but he always says in his podcast, don't be afraid to fail forward.
Yeah. Yeah.
I am, just for your purposes, students, I'm going to include the part of your assignment that will leave past tonight will be to connect with some of the alumni that we've met. Vannery was on that call, so her information is on there. I'll also include Alexandria, just so you can have it all together. It's broken down by industry. So if you're specific to an industry, all of that information will be listed together. So you should see that tonight. We have 4 minutes left. Any other questions?
And no question is too big or too little.
There are no stupid questions.
Also, I would like to add to also use Alexandria's advice on networking, even for grad school programs, because that's how I reached out to the dean of Harvard University, who was able to push my application forward, because I basically just did a cold email outreach to him and got on a 15-minute phone call, and that's what led me to getting my application accepted.
Great. Thank you for bringing that up, Vannery, because that could be a whole call in itself too. But what I will say in terms of individuals who are interested or exploring the ideas of, getting their master's or their PhD program, what I will suggest, emailing the director of that program. So when I was applying for grad school, I had a list of the top 10 schools I was interested in and wanted to apply to. And I would go and send an email just introducing myself. This is who I am. This is my career aspirations. And this is why I think that your program, this is also some tips for your essay for graduate school. This is why your program specifically will help me get to that point. And I also, I come from a need-based background, I will say. So at that time, I just didn't have the money to even apply. Graduate school can be expensive. It can be $100 an application. So who has $500 to drop for 5 applications with no guarantee that I'm getting accepted to any of them? So I ended up in that email, I would include to them, do you all offer application fee waivers for students, for students? Again, I don't have nothing else to lose. If I got to pay, then I'll end up having to pay. I don't know. I'll figure it out. But 9 times, I think I sent that to 20 directors, 20 programs, and 19 said, yes, we do application fee waivers. We'll waive they said, we'll waive your fee for you, like that. I said, okay. You don't get what you don't ask for, right? And then from there, it narrowed down because the GRE, which is the graduate school exam that you take, similar to the SAT, but for graduate school, I took that, and I think that comes with 4. You can send that to 4 schools, and then after you send it to 4 schools, you have to pay for each GRE test that's sent. So for me, that made it clear to me that I wanted to apply to 4 graduate schools, without having to pay $1 for that. I think I had to pay for, you got to pay for the GRE, but even GRE,
they have a fee.
Yeah, they have a fee waiver.
Yeah, they do.
I think I got a fee waiver for the GRE thing too. So I would definitely advise that. And when looking at schools for graduate schools, or looking at industry or area, jobs and things like that, have like a top 4, but be sure to have, Cornell was like my wild card. I'm not even gonna lie. I don't come from this kind of academic background, so I didn't see something like that. I haven't seen people like me who are doing things like that. So I was just like, the opportunity's presenting itself. I'm just gonna apply and continue with it. And, I applied there, I think, to 2 schools in DC and to a school, University of Southern California, I think. But I applied to the 2 top schools. I said, okay, these are my dream schools. These are my reaches. I don't know if I'm going to make it, if my GPA is there, if all of that is right, but I'm going to try. And then I had like a media school, and then you have your safety school on okay, I did my research. I see in terms of the profile of the student, or profile that the company brings people in, what's the typical profile of student that comes in, which is a question you can ask these the director or the admissions folks, to get a better understanding if you're a fit, or, how you line up against the competition, and then apply. That's the biggest thing. I tell people all the time, there are so many people that I know who easily more book smart than me, more street smart. You're always going to have somebody smarter, but you may not have someone who has the same push and drive and hard work as you. And because you even applied, some people aren't even going to apply, who may be even more competitive than you. So, don't give up on yourself is what I'll say, is don't sell yourself short. That's another thing I would tell my younger self. Don't sell yourself short, because you do bring value to the table. That's bigger than your GPA. That's bigger than, your grades, or, I'm not the president of all these clubs or all these things, or have all these things or whatever. That you do bring value to the spaces that you're in, and you have the potential to be great. I'm sorry, I started
no,
going off on a tangent.
Don't backtrack at all. This has been amazing. And just speaking for the number of students that stayed on, if this was class, they'd be out right at the end of class, but they hung in there with you. So this shows that this is a phenomenal presentation. I want to thank you for leading this discussion, this conversation, leading us through so many topics. Definitely want to thank Vannery for connecting us and continuously building my network. So I thank you, ma'am. And again, the students for hanging out. For those of you who are able to stay longer, that had questions, or that have questions that they didn't want to ask, but we'll email in the future. Thank you for just doing everything that you all need to do to stay and pay attention and learn everything that's possible. So students, watch for me from some messages, some emails, some announcements. Just on working towards Tuesday, which will be our last class. So you did, yes, and you were one of our last topics.
Right.
So thank you for doing
Right.
the conclusion of our class. If there's nothing else, thank you again. Everyone, stay safe, stay socially distanced, wash your hands, all that good stuff. But thank you again.
All righty. Thank you guys for
Thank you.